the Iranians definitely have the ability and capability to strike pinpoint precision, strikes. So if they say they already know where these military bases are, I'm sure we're going to expect to hear an American base getting blown up very soon. And what do the American military bases have to protect themselves? I guess they're relying on, I don't know. I don't think they have any air defense really. I'm not a military expert, but I wouldn't think that they have too much, or they don't have the power, the strength of the same one that the Iron Dome, in Israel has. But I don't know. This is not going the right way. I really thought Trump would back down. Now it looks like he's going to spend a lot of resources in aiding Israel, and he's going to give up, a lot of American fatalities within now to the future. We don't know how long this war will go on for. Definitely not the news you want to hear, and it's very strange, or not strange, very strategic by Trump to issue this statement around 8 o'clock p.m. on a Saturday. So a lot of people are finding out right about now, and a lot of them aren't going to figure it out or find out until probably tomorrow. Because, you make plans on Saturday at 8 o'clock. You're probably already out doing whatever you had to do on Saturday, so. All right, we got somebody chiming in on Twitch. Thank you for joining. Says your mic sounds like it's duplicated, by the way. How knowledgeable are you on this stuff? Any idea what Iran's options are now? I think Iran's options are still the exact same. I don't think they completely destroyed Fordo and all their nuclear sites. And I don't think they destroyed all their military aircrafts. And we don't know the total amount of missiles that Iran has. And like I said in another stream, that Lebanon is officially involved right now. So they said soon as the U.S. was going to get involved in any type of way or in any way offensively, they were going to get involved. So the Hezbollah in Lebanon is officially involved, and we heard that they have quite the arsenal or weaponry, So whatever was taken away from Iran can be absolutely reloaded, or what's it called? Can be I'm trying to look for a word that replenish, right? It can be replenished, and they could eat. I don't know how it's quite far from Lebanon to Iran, but maybe the strikes will just come straight out of Lebanon. And I also heard today Lebanon got struck with some drones or missiles from Israel. So it is definitely a war that is all over the place right now, all over the Middle East. And we're going to basically wait for, places like Afghanistan Kuwait, Iraq, to voice their opinion and voice their decision on what they're doing, because it's just a matter of time before one of the missiles drops on one of these places by an accident, right? Malfunctions. And we heard that an Iraq leader, some type of leader or high personnel, military personnel from Iraq, was killed in Iran today. So the Iraq military already has personnel being killed by either, U.S. strike or Iranian or Israeli strike. So it's literally, we're literally like minutes or like a day away from hearing, something new, like who's joining with whoever. But as we speak, I think it's USA and Israel and Iran's got, people who are on the verge, like Russia, on the verge of literally joining with them. And China, because China's getting their 70% of their oil supply from Iran. So if they hear too much like Iran is in some dire need, China just might step up to the plate before anybody. But as of right now, Lebanon is officially in. The Hezbollah in Lebanon is officially in. And I believe the other one is in Yemen. The Houthis are now officially in, because they stated that if U.S. bombs anything in Iran, we're officially in, and we will start to bomb any ships moving through the Red Sea. So, you got two new countries that are officially involved and on Iran's side. What an interesting Saturday here. All the way in safe, great North Canada here. We are 10,000 kilometers away from this craziness. Should be very interesting to see what Trump will say. Will he speak for 10 minutes? Will he speak for an hour? Will he get bombarded by the press, right? Like, I can just imagine the questions that he's going to get bombarded with. Now, Trump has 4 major advisors when it comes to this war stuff. One of them is the war general, the military general, the top chief. And then the other 3, I think, are like just within his circle there. All his appointees are employees. But we heard that story about Tulsi Gabbard there. Tulsi Gabbard was like, what is she, like some type of security expert or something like that? And she was telling the press that they have come to the decision that Iran does not have a nuclear bomb or missile, right? And then Trump is on the news going, she's wrong. And then she ends up eating her own words. She ends up trying to defend Trump, and not just go head to head with him, right? So who's telling the truth? I would lean towards Tulsi there. It is her job to figure it out, right? Like, but then Trump does get briefed a lot too, right? So, but if it came down to a court decision, if this was on trial, there wouldn't be enough evidence to prove that Iran has a nuclear weapon, right? This is just very sad for Iran. It's very sad for everybody, but Trump had to step in ASAP. I kind of got the feeling he wasn't going to wait the 2 weeks. It would have been too long of a wait, right? That's a huge slap in the face to Netanyahu. He's there, taking hits and seeing a lot of casualties. 2 weeks would have been way too long. You know how many more buildings, innocent, civilian buildings would have got struck in 2 more weeks? How much weaponry and resources would have been used by Israel? They would have been so depleted at that point. Let's see, there's some breaking news again. There's some crazy headlines here. All coming in here. Saturday, June 21st. We are live. You are watching Steve Stack's channel. It is live on Twitch only. It will be uploaded later on my YouTube channel at Stacks Rap. R-A-P. All one word. And you can see that right at the bottom of your screen there. Now, I think Trump did this pretty calculated and strategically here, because he had everybody guessing, when is he even going to speak about it, right? When is he going to make his decision? So before we even heard his decision, he laid out some strikes. So he caught him off guard. That's basically a military strategy, right? Catch your opponents off guard. And that is absolutely what I think happened here. We all thought he was just going to start speaking, and then, it's kind of like he was going to lay out the plan, and then the enemy would have definitely got almost like, a pre-briefing on, oh, he's about to strike us, let's prepare. But instead, we all thought he was going to give his decision in 2 weeks, and instead, we got a strike a day later. 3 strikes on 3 different nuclear sites. So he caught him off guard, there's no doubt. How much damage he did, I'll have to dig in a little bit, try and pull up some photos and some videos, but I don't think too many people were right in, that area, immediate area, because right now, there's probably a lot of people dead around that area too. I can imagine all the fumes coming out of there, and radiation now, and not too many people are going to run towards that place to take a photo or clean it up, right? What to expect in the next hour or two, or a few hours? It is only 4 a.m. there. We've seen strikes up until 6, and even in broad daylight, I think so. And you do have an Iranian feed up there, live cam. But who knows where it's facing towards. And the strike that the site that they hit in Fordo is 86 miles away from Tehran. So that live camera shot, you won't even see you won't see anything. So looks like a bunch of other things are popping up over here. Sources tell Israel journalist Ben Caspit that 6 to 8 U.S. B-2 bombers attacked the Fordo nuclear facility. United Arab Emirates. Okay, let's see what they're saying here. Iran's state-run IRNA news agency, quoting provincial official, acknowledges attack on Fordo nuclear facility. So it's officially been confirmed by, their actual statewide or state-run news agency. This is absolutely groundbreaking news, folks. Literally groundbreaking news. Where else are you going to hear that but this channel? Steve Stacks live, baby. We live. Straight out of Toronto, Ontario. If you guys want to donate, help the channel, help me out as a musician and all my tools, you can do that through e-transfer, bank wire, or PayPal. And those are both on your screen. That would greatly be appreciated. Any amount counts. I've been pumping out videos, live videos now for quite some time. My channel on YouTube has, 300 videos and just a broad range of stuff, everything from comedy to music to breaking news, politics, sports, you name it, man. Providing all the good stuff for you good people. We have now been live for 40 minutes. It is 9 p.m. Eastern Time. This live feed, this live CNN news feed here is just rolling. Here's another couple breaking headlines here. Funny, there's a guy named Brett McGurk. Now, if you go on my YouTube channel, I created a character, Captain McGurk. I spelled it a little differently. I had no idea there was a McGurk in his circle. All these names here. George Bush, Barack Obama, all these people are alive. I would love to hear their take on this, right? We hear all these newscaster, news personnel, and, just YouTube streamers and all these other streamers, voicing their opinions, and former military people and blah, blah, blah. I would love to hear what George Bush has to say about this, what Barack Obama has to say about this, and what Joe Biden has to say about what just happened. What we just heard tonight.
We'll keep you on standby as we wait to see how things evolve. But I'm just going to go straight to DC and speak with our Mark Stone. And Mark, we understand there's an update. President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu have spoken. Just give us a readout of that.
Yeah, not a huge amount, but we can confirm that Trump spoke to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this evening after the United States dropped those bombs on the Iranian nuclear sites. That is according to a senior White House official. We know that they've been speaking every day since this began just over a week ago. But we now have confirmation that they have spoken. Donald Trump has not been in Washington today. He left the White House last night for Bedminster, his golf course in New Jersey. But he always had planned, we had his schedule, and he was always due back to the White House tonight at 6 p.m., so 3 hours ago. Now, what we understood from that was that he was coming back, and we were told he was coming back for a briefing of his Security Council in the Situation Room. But we did not expect that would be the point at which he would, in fact, not just authorize these strikes, because presumably that happened a few hours before that, but would have watched these strikes taking place in real time from the Situation Room. So a remarkable turn of events over the course of the past 24 hours. It was just yesterday that he, through his press secretary, announced that he would give diplomacy up to 2 weeks to run its course. And, you know, I've been looking back at messages I've had and discussions I've had with sources both here in Washington but in European capitals as well over the course of the past few days. And they're all saying the same thing. They're all saying that the sense that they had got from discussions with the Trump administration was that he was emphatically of the view that diplomacy should be given a chance. And yet tonight, we discover that he has in fact gone for this strike. Now, I think the way Donald Trump may or may not frame this when he speaks in an hour or so's time, but I think his mindset will be will be one of that this is just a moment that, yes, he still believes diplomacy can be given a chance, and that this decisive strike will in fact draw the Iranians into heel. But as we've been discussing, it is a big gamble. A couple of other updates just to bring you, which I think are interesting. The Speaker, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, very, very important, of course, here in domestic politics. He has released a statement. We know he was briefed by President Trump. He says the military operations in Iran should serve as a clear reminder to our adversaries and allies that President Trump means what he says. He goes on to say the president gave Iran's leader every opportunity to make a deal, but Iran refused to commit to a nuclear disarmament agreement. He concludes the statement by saying, God bless our brave men and women in uniform, the most lethal fighting force on the planet, as we pray for their safe return home. May God bless America. So, of course, Mike Johnson, Republican, closely aligned with Donald Trump, and clearly very pleased with what has happened tonight. There will be some on Capitol Hill who are not. Donald Trump has authorized this strike tonight without congressional approval. Now, there are some who believe that is wrong, that he should have gone to Congress before authorizing any military action in the Middle East. He chose not to do that. He will argue that there is good reason for that, but I think, you know, it's a discussion for down the line, but it's certainly an interesting one. One last point I want to make, Yalda, you and I have been discussing over the course of the past few days the splits within Donald Trump's coalition, the different voices in his ears. He's been told by the likes of Ted Cruz and other influential Republicans, go for it. This is your moment to strike Iran. This is your moment to make a difference. And yet in the other ear, he's been very influential MAGA voices saying, do not do it. Well, Steve Bannon, his former chief strategist, is one of those big voices saying, absolutely do not get involved. Tonight, he's been live on his own podcast. Interesting comment. He says, we have now become combatants in this war between Israel and the Persians. I guess you say it's now a broader war. And then he goes on to say, although it looks like the president is trying to keep this to a very tactical strike. So we're going to begin to see the way that the MAGA voices, who are so influential in influencing Donald Trump's thinking, how they're reacting to this pivotal moment.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, a crucial moment right now. Mark, thank you so much. We're just going to keep you there for a moment. I also understand Donald Trump has continued to give some phone interviews. Earlier, he spoke to Axios. He's just spoken to Reuters in a phone call, and he said this was an amazing success tonight. They should make peace immediately. They should stop immediately. Otherwise, they'll get hit again. So Donald Trump issuing another warning to Iran, saying that this was a successful operation. It was amazing, as he said, and he said they should make peace immediately. They should stop immediately. Otherwise, they'll get hit again. We'll continue to bring you those updates as they come. But let's just bring in Alan Eyre from the Middle East Institute and former senior U.S. diplomat. He joins us now. Alan, thank you very much for joining us. Just give us your reaction to the developments of the last hour.
Suffice it to say, I'm unpleasantly surprised by these events. I was hoping that this administration would not do that. I don't think that this strike will in any way, well, at least permanently end Iran's nuclear program. They'd already moved much of the relevant material out of their nuclear sites. I don't think this will lead for the Iranians to sue for peace. So it's now in the Iranians' hands. The Iranian leadership that existed about 10 days ago would have been relatively prudent and not rush to attack U.S. forces. I think that's still the case. I think an immediate widespread attack on U.S. forces in the region is unlikely. But I think the probability of a wider escalation and continuation of this war is greater now than it was a few hours ago.
And Alan, no doubt the conversations that the president would have asked questions about the day after. And part of that calculation would have been, I guess, even though this is the roll of the dice, that he wouldn't want to see this prolonged into a bigger conflict that would drag the United States in. Are you saying that you're concerned that the day after now looks like a more destabilized region?
I don't think there was significant, or at least significant talk about the day after, at least with the requisite expertise. I think that whatever form of Iranian government survives, whether it's this one or a more nationalist, a more militarized one, or whether this regime in fact stays in power, they're not necessarily more likely to give up their nuclear program. So if President Trump thinks this will cause the Iranians to sue for peace and give up their nuclear energy program,
bumpy ride.
I don't see that happening. But again, there's just so much that's unknown. President Trump obviously is seeing intelligence that I don't, and so decided to roll the dice. The question now is, does Israel stop bombing? I mean, I saw some Israeli sources saying they consider the nuclear program eliminated. But what's nuclear's war goal? What is Israel trying to get out of this? They're not just trying to end Israel's nuclear program. They're also trying to, as they've admitted, destabilize the current Iranian government.
I just want to unpack some of the things you've said. So, first of all, the idea that, and that has been floating around in the last few days, with the Iranians themselves saying that they would be moving some of the material out of these sites. Just talk us through that in terms of, these sites have been hit, especially Fordow was in these sites of the United States and Israel. But you believe that material, the essential material that was needed, has already been moved to other places?
I think it's highly likely. I think that Iran's nuclear program the hardware is geographically dispersed, and it's impossible to eliminate it to the extent that it can't be reconstituted if there is a political will by the Iranian government to do so. Obviously, we can talk about greater or lesser amounts of time it would take to reconstitute that, but the key variable here is, will Israeli and U.S. military action be such that it causes the people running Iran to renounce the nuclear program? And I don't think we're there yet. And I don't think you can get there kinetically by bombing Iran.
And Alan, you have dealt with the Iranians. You're privy to the JCPOA, the nuclear deal that President Obama struck. Just talk us through, the interactions then, and was there a sense that they were willing then versus where they are now?
Certainly, back then they were willing to cap the amount they enriched, the type of centrifuges they had, the level to which they enriched uranium, and also to accept vastly greater verification measures and vastly greater transparency into their nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of sanctions. So when we were doing this, neither side got all they wanted. As President Obama said, he would have preferred to not have one centrifuge spinning. But back then we got a deal that was good enough, and the key variables back then were we were able to drastically limit the efficiency, the scope, the activities of Iran's nuclear program, and also vastly increase our ability to look into it. And I think it's likely now, though it's too soon to tell, that we're going to lose, obviously, that ability, that transparency, our ability to look into Iran's nuclear program on the day after.
Yeah. And maybe that is exactly
you also
why
mentioned
there
that perhaps Israel is not just looking at the elimination of Iran's nuclear program, but also has openly talked about regime change at different points and destabilizing the regime. But do you feel that that is also not plausible?
Who was right and who was wrong?
I mean, there's no perhaps. The Israeli Minister of Defense said we're looking to eliminate the nuclear program, eliminate their missile production capabilities, and eliminate the axis of terrorism, their axis of terrorism, and also destabilize the Iranian regime and drive people out of Tehran. There's no indication yet on that last goal, destabilizing the government, that they've been successful. According even to Israeli press, I was reading something recently in the Jerusalem Times. So far, the Israeli intelligence is indicating that the current Iranian regime is still firmly in control of all its organs of power. Obviously, it's taken a great hit kinetically. But if the Israeli government is trying to topple this regime and replace it with a more user-friendly government to the West and to Israel, there's no indications that we're starting to see that yet. There's been a significant rally around the flag effect by the Iranian people. And at least anecdotally, I hear that whereas before, there was a lot of pro-Israeli sentiment in Iran, at least more so than in the neighboring Arab countries. There certainly is far less of that now.
Alan, we're really grateful for your analysis and thoughts. Thank you very much for joining us here on the program. Let's go back to our Mark Stone, who's standing by. And Mark, in about 45 minutes, no, not in 45 minutes, we're still waiting, actually, a couple more hours till we hear from the president. But interesting, a different sort of analysis on the situation, that there really is no certainty around whether this particular operation has been successful, but even greater than that.
Ultra-realistic voice cloning has arrived. Expand your workflow.
Even Israeli intelligence, that hasn't looked likely at this stage.
Yeah, you're right. You were right in what you said initially. It is 45 minutes. It's 9:15 here in Washington. So 45 minutes until we hear from the president. And it will be fascinating to see how he frames this. I think he will frame it as a victory, as a one-hit, in and out, quick, and he will be insistent that that is it, that there will be no unraveling of this from this decision, that things will not unravel. Of course, that's a big gamble, because the Iranians have said that they will retaliate. It's interesting that you and Ali were discussing a moment ago that it's been 24 hours since there was last an Iranian attack on Israel. Are they running out of their ballistic missiles? Are they now incapable of coordinating an attack? Is that part of the calculus in the American military system? Do they believe that now is the moment, because in fact Iran has been degraded to such an extent that they would not be able to mount any sophisticated attack either against Israel or against American assets in the region. We don't know, but it is certainly the case, and we've been told a few times over the course of the past few days that the Americans have been very impressed they know that Israel has an impressive ability to defend itself. It's got used to that over many years, but they've been impressed with the way that Israel has managed to defend itself over the course of the past week. It was only a couple of weeks ago that Steve Witkoff, who is Donald Trump's Middle East envoy, briefed a few senators here in Washington and said that if the Israelis did attack Iran, which of course they did, then the prospects of a mass casualty event in Israel were very, very high. Well, that has not materialized. Yes, there have been a lot of ballistic missiles that have got through the missile defense system, but there hasn't been a successful attack with a mass casualty event in Israel. That, I think, has encouraged Donald Trump, and I think probably played into his thinking when he made this decision to go for a strike now. One other thing to tell you, Yalda, which is interesting. As you might expect, Iranian state TV is rolling on all of this as well. State TV controlled by the government. They are claiming that, in fact, this attack has had limited damage and that Trump is bluffing. The only damage that was done, so they say, so Iranian state TV says, at Fordo has been to the entrance and exits of the tunnels, and that the facility itself has not been damaged. That is their claim. The Americans will be claiming something quite different, I'm sure, and only daylight and human intelligence will ascertain for sure just how successful from an American perspective and how disastrous from an Iranian perspective this strike has been.
Iranian state television is
absolutely. And certainly the last week has taught us that Israel has invested heavily in human intelligence on the ground in Iran. Mark, I'm just going to keep you right there and speak now to Arash Azizi, a lecturer at Yale University and contributing writer at The Atlantic. Arash, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. I think we can get him up on our screen in a moment. There you are, Arash. Just give us your assessment of what you've heard in the last hour or so since Donald Trump put out those statements on Truth Social to say that these 3 nuclear sites were targeted.
It does appear that the Iranian state is claiming that they had emptied the sites. It also makes sense because there was a real threat that they'd be attacked, so that they emptied the sites. The bravado is that they want to say that this doesn't really matter. That Iran has the technical expertise. The nuclear program is not destroyed. Those who are opponents of the attacks are predicting that this guarantees that Iran will go nuclear in 5 to 10 years. So, we have this sort of these kind of assessments and the long-term assessments. But I've spoken to people in Iran in the last hour, including people who are in the know or close to the positions of power. It seems very clear to me, Yalda, that we are in the middle of a battle in Tehran, a political battle over the future of Iran. It's very clear. This battle was already ongoing in the past few days, and it's now been posed very clearly. Iran must choose. Does it want to start a protracted war with the United States? Does it want to potentially start a war that will implicate also the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, Saudi Arabia and others by attacking them? Or does it ultimately want to find a negotiated path with Donald Trump? And does it believe that it can get a deal with Donald Trump? Does it believe that Donald Trump is honest, when he says that he has from the beginning that Iran does have this choice, a war or a deal? And that's the conversation that is going on in Iran. Now, for all of my life, I was born in 88. Since 1989, one man in Iran has called all the shots, and that's the man that you're showing right now, Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader. He has brought this country nothing but economic destruction, international isolation, social repression, and now a war. Now he has opened the path of, 3 nuclear power countries have attacked us. 3 years. 3 nuclear power countries have attacked Iranian soil, U.S. being the latest one. So it really is the question, as I said, this battle in Tehran about the future. And the question posed is that will those patriotic elements inside the regime push Khamenei aside if he continues to refuse and continue on this line?
And what is your sense from, assessing the supreme leader and looking at those advisors around him, that which direction do you think they might go? Because ultimately, whatever the regime may be, they are still very pragmatic.
They really are pragmatic in some ways, although Khamenei also, he's been pragmatic in many ways. Pragmatism has sort of run to the past few years. The chain that started by October 7, really has gotten Khamenei. He lost his entire access, and now he's in a direct confrontation. Khamenei's art, if you will, they used to call it his strategic patience, was that he would bark at the U.S. and Israel as much as he wanted. He would threaten them. He would do, a terror attack here or there, but he would not get into a direct confrontation with them. That jig is up. The direct confrontation are here. Hundreds of Iranians, actually about almost 1,000 Iranians are dead last week. Our families have, lived under the threat of dying for the past week. So that jig is up. And I think, the pragmatism, here's where it sort of becomes interesting. I think Khamenei is very cautious. In fact, paradoxically, part of what he has gotten us to this is his cautiousness. I mean, he hasn't sort of responded to many U.S. and Israeli attacks before as much. So that's why we are in this corner. But as to what he would do, I think he finds himself sort of isolated, ailing. He's an 86-year-old man, and listening to very contradictory advice. I think there are, as I said, it's really a battle in Tehran, and it's not just advice anymore. People are putting out teams together. People are already thinking about how to replace him. So I can't predict. I think it's 50-50, Alda, really, by this point, as to what Iran will do next.
Arash, I'm just going to keep you there for a moment because we have an update from Mark Stone, who joins us back again from DC. Mark, just your update.
Yeah, well, Donald Trump is currently doing a round of phone interviews in the unique way that he does. After a moment like this, he gets on the phone and he speaks to different networks. He's just been speaking to Fox News, and he confirmed to them that the United States dropped 6 bunker-busting bombs during its strike on Fodor, and 30 Tomahawk missiles were used on the strikes on the other sites. So six of these absolutely vast bunker-busting bombs that are only capable of being carried by America's B-2 stealth bombers that we know took off today from Missouri. They confused people because they headed west, not east. They headed west towards Guam, over into the Pacific. But we do not know the details of the flight path yet, but it seems possible that they continued and effectively flew right away around the world, being refueled as they went, no doubt, and then carried out these strikes using these MOPs, as they're known, these massive ordnance penetrating bombs to penetrate deep into that mountain in Fodor to take out that nuclear site. So 6 of the bunker-busting bombs. Incidentally, these are bombs that have never been used in anger before. They've been tested before, but never actually been used. And I think that was one of the calculations that was being made in the Pentagon.
So the way Trump is as a character, he likes to be the best and always praise himself, right? So I heard on another, I guess, YouTube channel or something, they were talking about this. What better way to be remembered, for Trump, he would say, than to be known as the first president to use the first B-2 bomb ever, right? I'm the president that's dropped the biggest, baddest bomb ever in the history of the United States of America, right? That's something that he would look, high upon himself, highly about himself, that, would probably set him in the history books as being a great man and, being known
historic
forever.
Military success, or the catalyst for many, many unknown consequences down the line. Well, we will see, Yalda.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, thank you so much for that update. We'll keep you there for a moment and go back to Arash Azizi, who's standing by for us. And Arash, you was talking about the mood in Iran and also the crossroads for the Iranians at this moment. Just talk us through what friends, family, people in Iran that you've been speaking to over the course of the last week have been saying.
You know, they're terrified more than anything else. They're really trying to survive. They're trying to run for their lives. Many people, my elderly grandmother included, have left Tehran because Tehran is obviously sort of not a safe city anymore. They've gone around the country. I will tell you one thing: if there's a positive story at the same time, is that there is really incredible national solidarity in Iran. I think people feel like they're together in a war, and they're helping each other in I think it's very clear that people are by and large helping each other, with getting medicine, getting food, getting sort of help that they need. And this does not translate, however, into support for the government or the regime, as people have said. I think they're incredibly angry at the regime for getting them into this war. But more than anything, they live in a very I'm often asked on TV channels, what people think in Iran, and I channel them. But when I speak to them,
wow, he's lagging.
Oh, that was Arash Azizi, and we've just lost him. That line was no longer stable. But I'm just going to come back to Ali, who's here with me in Jerusalem for some of the updates. And we're hearing all sorts of news at the moment. In the next half an hour, we are going to hear from Donald Trump, who says he is going to address the nation to give them an update. He's been giving a series of phone interviews, and he's been speaking every day, virtually, with Benjamin Netanyahu, and we understand they spoke this evening as well.
They did, and one of the other indicators, the many indicators we had that this might be coming, was that the Israeli sort of Security Council, or at least sort of Netanyahu's close security officials, decided to meet this evening, which seemed to coincide with everything. No doubt Netanyahu has been leaning on Trump day by day, saying, get involved, we need you, we need your particular military support that can achieve what we are trying to set out to do, and that is to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities. I was noting the Iranian state TV claiming that Trump is bluffing. The only damage that's been done to Fordow is to the entrance and exit tunnels. I mean, 6 massive ordnance penetrators will have done considerably more than just simply blown the doors off. And I think it is still, in the early hours, a little too early to read too much into Iranian state television, because they will also be sort of trying to sort of gather themselves and work out what is going on for themselves. But Iranian state TV will be an interesting place to watch over the coming hours and see their messaging. If their messaging does kind of remain sort of similar to that, as in this was all sort of unsuccessful, not much to see here. That is also a message internally to people within Iran, but it could potentially be a message externally as well, because of course if you downplay the damage that the Americans have done, then potentially also you sort of bring down the scale, what kind of retaliatory action you need to take as well. So Iranian state TV should be something to keep a close eye on in the hours ahead.
Ali, thank you so much for that update. We'll be coming back to you in a moment, but I'm joined now by journalist Negar Mortazavi. Thank you very much, Negar, for joining us on the program. Just give us a sense of what you're hearing from inside Iran, because we have heard from Iranian state TV. They have downplayed, as my colleague Alistair Bunkle was just saying, this attack, but it's still dark in Iran, in the region. And we're waiting to get a better assessment of what's happened.
Or from the Middle East, can they reach over here?
Right. So, I mean, this is really, again, another shock after a week of shock, because President Trump had just announced that he's going to wait another 2 weeks. And today, Secretary Rubio has said that the U.S. prefers to resolve this issue diplomatically. Iran met with the Europeans yesterday. So there was some hope raising for the potential of diplomacy and the
like
U.S.
thinking
its potential entering, and then came this absolute shock. The few
missile.
people I've been in touch with just in this very short time, it's also middle of the night in Tehran, it's just a continuation of the shock and the horror that started last week when the attacks initially started. People don't know which part of the country is safe. The war had been framed in the past week as a war on Iran's nuclear program, on military and nuclear targets only. But civilians saw with their own eyes and actually experienced that it wasn't only that civilian homes had been targeted. Car bombs were going off on the street. People were trying to flee on the roads. Some got attacked. And so the civilian toll has been something that wasn't expected, between 400 to 600, I'd heard. And reporting is also not very updated or accurate, and thousands injured and lots of people displaced in the country. So we're talking to people who are no longer in their homes, especially in big cities. A lot of people fled Tehran as far as they could after President Trump issued that evacuation order out of Tehran. And now the U.S. has entered war, and we don't know what the next step would be by the Iranians.
It's going to get juicy.
Yeah, and are they feeling like this could continue, or is there a sense that the United States has launched this attack, and Donald Trump has said that he is now looking for peace, but are Iranians no doubt nervous about what could come next?
Absolutely, because the government, the Islamic Republic, has promised and threatened that if the U.S. does attack them, well, first of all, they see the U.S. as indirectly involved in the war as a supporter of Israel, but they also said if the U.S. does attack them, they're going to attack the U.S. And we saw in 2020 when the U.S. assassinated their top general Soleimani, the Iranians did retaliate by attacking that U.S. base in Iraq. So I think the most probable scenario, I don't want to predict by certainty, but the most probable scenario, if we look at their statements.
Festool, built better for 100 years.
They don't respond to every attack, that the attacks are going to continue and accelerate. And if they do attack and engage with the United States, obviously this is the world's biggest, mightiest, most powerful army. So nothing good is going to come out of this, and the population is just in shock and horror and terrified, not really knowing what to do. The airspace has been closed for a week. People are trying to flee the country, some via land borders, and it's just absolute mayhem and uncertainty. And internet was disconnected for a couple of days. Now it's back, so people are getting more news from their family and loved ones, but still it's like unclear and uncertain, and brings back memories of the 1980s. War with Iraq.
That's all it might take is the first bomb, and you might.
Certainly Iran hasn't seen anything like this since, as you say, the 1980s. There's also been a lot of talk this week of regime change. We've seen top commanders and officials from the Iranian government being taken out. Just give us a sense of the mood around that from Iranians, because we've seen protests over the years against the regime, but Iranians, have they had mixed feelings about this sort of coming in this way and through a series of attacks?
Canada and USA, folks.
Sure. So, I mean, the regime change, first of all, how is regime change going to happen through sporadic aerial strikes? That's not very clear, because when regime change did happen through regime change wars, but by the U.S. recently, Afghanistan and Iraq, it involves boots on the ground. And that's something that so far the U.S. said they're not interested in engaging. There's also no appetite for that in the U.S. But also looking at the results of these situations, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, there's fear of the uncertainty. People may be very, very unhappy and angry with the status quo, with the regime. They have political, economic, social grievances. But these freedom bombs, per se, that's coming from the sky are also falling on their homes, on their residences, have killed civilians. So I think people are more clear-eyed about the situation where they feel like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, a repressive internal domestic situation that doesn't address their grievances and problems and demands, and now a foreign entity that does not seem very interested in the fate of these civilians by targeting them, and also is just interested in destroying a nuclear program. So I think there's also a sense of confusion as what this exactly is. There's also Israeli messaging broadcast even from Iranian state TV when it was hacked, asking Iranians to rise up and take matters into their hand and end this regime. And how are people going to do that when they're under bombings and fleeing their homes and cities?
Nagar, I'm just going to give a short update based on what NBC is reporting, and this is also based on multiple senior White House officials saying that they believe that President Trump, when he addresses the nation in about 20 minutes or time is when we're expecting it, that he will try and focus on the diplomacy around this as
so
well.
guys,
and,
from Tehran
said,
to
they believe,
Boston, Massachusetts,
that he's not currently planning
9,000
inside Iran. These
over
officials say
9,000
President Trump hopes the
kilometers
strikes
distance.
propel Iran back to negotiations as he presses its leaders to an agreement that will end this particular war. Nagar, I just want to get your reaction to that, whether you think on the Iranian side, given
over
what has
9,000
happened,
kilometers,
that they will
now let's try from Lebanon.
see this as a moment where they have to be
Lebanon
pragmatic
to
and come to the negotiating
Boston.
table.
I mean, I don't know. They don't have a lot of good options in front of them.
8,719 kilometers.
Had asked over social
Do you guys
media
think that's
the past
possible?
week, asking for unconditional surrender. I don't see that.
Canada's
as
a little
far as
bit
their
closer,
own
but it's
motto
the
and their, rhetoric and also
the far
past
east. It's
actions,
Quebec.
Because the thinking in Tehran
I
is
don't know
that
what
they surrender,
the furthest
they're
east
going to
city
pay
in
even a
Quebec
heavier
is,
price
but
in
we'll
the
just say
long term,
Laval.
that this is going to be the way they're going to be dealt with.
I don't think
At the
it's
same
Laval.
time, escalating this by attacking the U.S., because this was an escalation by the U.S., but Iran's response will escalate it even further, can also bring more fire.
It's obviously a little bit less
from
than, it's
this
probably
unpredictable president
8,600
in the White
kilometers,
House.
right?
And so honestly, there are no good options in front of them. I suspect that they will probably go with a response. Now, how that response is going to look like, it's unclear. They could close or disrupt oil shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. They could attack U.S. interests across the region, many of them in Arab countries, Iran's neighbors, which they have threatened before, or in any other shape or form, or they could still use what's remaining of their allies in the region of this axis of resistance, the Houthis or whatnot. But I just don't see that pragmatism really being echoed in Tehran.
Nagar, we're grateful for your time. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm just going to go to Erbil now and speak with our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, who's standing by there for us. And Stuart, we've been hearing a lot of assessment around this, and Donald Trump continuing to reiterate in multiple news interviews that he has done in the last half an hour or so with Reuters and various others, describing the operations as a great success, as amazing. He's going to be addressing the nation, we believe, in about 20 minutes' time. But no doubt, where you are, everyone is on high alert, because while Donald Trump is saying this is a success, we wait and see how the Iranians respond to this.
Well, yeah, there's more than one side in this, isn't there? The sun's coming up, as you can see, Yelda, so perhaps we'll start getting some pictures from Iran as to exactly what has happened at these various sites that have been struck. But I would say there is a concern here. There is an expectation that if Iran takes this position of being very aggressive, that it could itself launch missile attacks on US interests here. The Baghdad embassy is a very clear target, though we are told by sources there that it is virtually empty now, that all the staff have gone. I can't confirm that, but very reliable sources are telling us that is the case. But there are a number of American bases, some very near to us here in Erbil, that could be attacked. Not just from Iran, though, but by Iranian supporting militias here. Now, you've got to remember that they are part of the government. They are very much part of its military infrastructure as well. And while the government might wish to control them, it's very hard for them to do so. They've been angered about about the potential for the United States getting involved. They've attacked American interests in the past, and it's very possible that they will wish to do this unilaterally, if you like, nothing to do with what the government here says or tells them to do. And the reason for that, and I think it is almost unique, is that Iraq has relations with Iran. It's naturally leaning towards them. There's a huge number of people who are Shia, who are supporters of Iran. But also it's host to the American military bases. It's very dependent on America in all sorts of areas. So they have this very fine line that they have to tread to try and, if you like, stay with both sides. And there's some interesting things. A third of all power to this country comes from Iran gas supply. So any disruption in that would affect the country, would start having blackouts. They've had awful problems with power over decades now, despite being this oil-rich country. So there's all sorts of issues that are going on here. An awful lot of people are concerned about an escalation. And I think what we've been hearing in the last couple of hours or so from your various commentators is that the president clearly is trying to say this was a one-off. We've shown what we can do more if we need to, but now is the time for peace and for talks. We haven't heard from Iran. We don't know what they're going to do. But I think to just say, okay, that's it and it's done, seems unlikely, unless, and I think Ali was referring to earlier, is that there has been some sort of accommodation reached perhaps with Iran that this is going to happen. We call it a day at that. Now let's get back to talks. But to me, that feels a little bit like wishful thinking, to be honest, but you just don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But the president has made that decision to carry out those attacks. They have happened. Critically, it's going to be as just exactly what those attacks have achieved. And maybe Iran is able to, as they're currently saying, playing it down and saying they've just destroyed the entrance and the exit. It's probably a bit more than that, as Ali was saying. But it'll be interesting if they do continue to play it down. However, key issue in Iraq is these militia groups.
Another thing that I want to just point on here is you keep hearing, we just heard it, that Iran was able to move a lot of their material from these sites. Now, from what I hear, is you cannot move unstable uranium. So all that uranium underground, you can't just pick that up and move that. That's a serious risk, for the people trying to move it. And in my eyes, it's impossible. So if they hit that site, their uranium is now useless, probably.
From my understanding, my recollection is that they were terrified because their air defense systems didn't work. Now, we know that all the bases have air defense systems, but that doesn't mean that they can necessarily stop. Depends the type of missiles that are being fired at them. Do you know, there is another bit to this, Yelda, which we don't really think about. But one of the reasons why the Americans are here is to control Islamic State and to make sure that they don't grow up again. Now, if the American bases are attacked, if American personnel are targeted, if American citizens who are here are attacked, then there will definitely be a reduction and withdrawal of the American soldiers, potentially just into a defensive capacity. Now, in that scenario, then they're no longer involved in the controlling of Islamic State. In that vacuum, Islamic State will grow again. We've seen them before. They're incredible. They haven't gone away. We forget that they haven't gone away
Stuart,
at all.
I'm just going to...
If the Americans aren't involved... Sorry,
Stuart, I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 minute, and then I want you to pick up your thought, because we've just got some developing news. We've been hearing in the last hour or so from Donald Trump, but we've now heard from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has posted on X saying tonight President Trump and the United States acted with a lot of strength. So just some of the first statements coming out from Benjamin Netanyahu. We understand that he and President Trump have spoken. They've been speaking virtually every day since last Friday when Israel launched the first strikes on Iran. And we understand that they have also spoken in the last hour or so where President Trump gave Benjamin Netanyahu an update. And just in the last few minutes, we've heard from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying tonight President Trump and the United States acted with a lot of strength. He continues, Trump's bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities will change history. So just some statements coming out from Benjamin Netanyahu on X about the operations that took place in the early hours of this morning here in the region. There was a lot of speculation that this would potentially happen, although a lot of uncertainty as well. And we heard from President Donald Trump earlier when he put out that statement saying and confirming that that attack, a series of attacks on the nuclear facilities had taken place. Benjamin Netanyahu continues and says history will record that Trump acted to deny the most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. So Benjamin Netanyahu putting out that statement.
Guys, I'm absolutely stunned by how many wars are going on in the world. So in modern history or in recorded history, as far as wars have been documented, are we in the era of the most wars, active wars, going on all at once in the world? We got so many different wars going on right now that I'm sure this is the record for most wars all at once in recorded history. I'm not talking about in the 1500s. I'm not talking about 500 AD or none of that stuff, right? Like, I'm talking about pretty modern. I believe we are sitting in an era and a time where there are the most recorded, most wars going on right now all at once. Everything from, what is it there, Nigeria and oh man, what are some of these places? Like, there's just so much, like the rebel groups against the government group, and they're just, there's a Congo, Republic of Congo as well, and oh man, and what's it called there? Myanmar, is it Myanmar? There's just so many wars going on right now. It's too hard to keep up.
Not necessarily for the good, though. We just don't know what they've achieved. What the Prime Minister is inferring is that the ability of Iran to produce nuclear weapons has been finished by this attack. There's nothing I've read or know that about is absolutely guaranteed from this. Certainly any system for building anything can be started again. The definite feeling it's suggested by the Prime Minister is that this has been a conclusive attack, and it's at the very least put back any type of nuclear development back many years. He's obviously inferring further that actually it is the end, and that there is now going to be a change in the position of the Middle East, and things will change, obviously he's saying, for the better. But we're really going to have to see what has happened in those attacks, and when we can see that, there'll be an analysis of exactly how effective it's been.
Burkina Faso.
Stuart, thank you so much for that update, and we'll be coming back to you in a moment. But I just want to show our viewers that video that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu posted, the one we were referring to, where he thanks President Trump for the operations that have taken place. Let's just have a look.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history. In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things. But in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed. It has done what no other country on earth could do. History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace. President Trump and I often say, peace through strength. First comes strength, then comes peace. And tonight, President Trump and the United States acted with a lot of strength. President Trump, I thank you, The people of Israel thank you. The forces of civilization thank you. God bless America. God bless Israel. And may God bless our unshakable alliance, our unbreakable faith.
Well, you're listening there to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with that statement that he has put out on X. And as he said, and I quote him, history will record that Trump acted to deny the most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. Let's bring in our Alistair Bunkle. And we've been talking about the statements that have been coming out from Donald Trump, whether that's been in interviews that he's given, phone interviews, or on Truth Social, quintessential Trump. This was very much quintessential Benjamin Netanyahu.
It was, and ticking all the boxes for Donald Trump, giving him praise, delivering him ownership of the events tonight, to lay the platform for Donald Trump to praise the US military and his own actions, of course. It's not yet light here. It is still the early hours, and so we are all trying to make sense of what has happened and what might come next. And we need to be careful not to read too much into everything. But, that statement from Benjamin Netanyahu spoke about strength through peace, and what can come next can be peace. What wasn't in there was a sort of a suggestion that, more now needs to be done.
So what I'm going to show you right now is an active conflicts map just in the Middle East right now. And this was from 2022 to 2024. So this is not even active. There it is, January 1st to November 29th, 2024. So Iran was pretty quiet with conflicts. There's still a bunch, but not as many as Iraq, Syria, and now you can see a little bit in there. I guess that's no Gaza and Israel is not. They're not reporting any right there. Oh, so this is just in Iran, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and the Red Sea. So there's that. And if this was for up until yesterday, the date yesterday or something, you would see Iran probably littered with spots. So just these 4 countries right now are absolutely littered with conflicts. No rest for all the citizens, man. Unbelievable what's going on in this world.
Edge about what could come
world
next.
Should be getting
very much
more
so.
peaceful.
I suspect there'll be a very tense Sunday here and across the region as everybody awaits that Iranian response. Of course, there'll be an expectation that Israel will be attacked again, although it has been now not far off 26 hours since the last major Iranian attack on Israel, the longest gap between missile attacks since Israel first started its war against Iran just over a week ago. Again, let's not read too much into that. Iran still has the capability to attack Israel. Iran certainly has the capability to attack US military bases if it wants around the region. I would have thought it'd be the US military bases that will be the main target. Trump has tried to make it clear that this was an attack on Iranian military targets. They haven't gone after senior regime officials, for example, and so if it's going to be a sort of a like-for-like response, like-for-like response, because
composer,
America gone after nuclear facilities, but if it's going to be a sort of military-for-military response, then it would be US military bases around the region that I think would be most at threat. Again, you might be able to narrow it down because you would assume that the Iranians won't want to target a country that houses a US military base that might be of significance, like, for example, Qatar, which has quite close links to Iran, but also hosts the largest US base and air base in the Middle East. So it could be the likes of Iraq and Syria, where they have attacked multiple times, either directly or through their proxies in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Ali, let's bring in our Mark Stone, because, Mark, we're about 3 minutes or so away from when we expect Donald Trump the president to address the nation. And we are expecting him to be firm, as he has been, but we're also expecting him to talk about diplomacy.
Yeah, because he will frame this as a decisive strike out of which he hopes and he believes that diplomacy can come, that this strength, this sort of moment of strength, from that, peace will come. As Netanyahu said in his statement, I imagine that the framing of Netanyahu's statement was closely aligned to the conversation that we know Netanyahu and Trump have had this evening since these strikes took place. Just to pick up on your conversation just now about where the Iranians may try and attack from, Syria or Iraq. Well, one key calculus in the American administration over the past week has been that they've been watching very closely to see how effective Iran's proxies have been at attacking Israel in these series of counterattacks. And the answer is not very effective. So that has been a very important for Donald Trump as he's weighed whether or not to get involved. He and his generals have been watching, and they've seen that actually Iran has not been that capable. There has been no mass casualty event in Israel. So that has kind of buoyed them into thinking, you know what, maybe we can get away with what we now know wasn't just one strike, it was six
conflicts
of these
in the
bombs,
war.
6 of these massive
we can head over
bombs
to the ACLED
we will wait to see the satellite imagery, which will give us some sense as the sun rises of just how successful it has been. Let me tell you too that we know now that when President Trump emerges in the White House in just a few moments' time, he will be flanked by his Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth,
14,583 organized political violence events
J.D. Vance. They will all walk behind the
month
president
of May.
As he approaches the podium. This is not, I don't think, going to take
place.
place in the Oval Office. It's going to be an address
more
to the
events
nation,
than predicted.
From elsewhere
an 8% growth
in the White House, perhaps the East Room.
You could just see violence and conflicts are growing in the world.
Yeah, as you say, in the next few moments, we are going to be hearing from
the difference was
President
driven
Trump,
primarily by an increase of 348 violence against civilian
on Friday,
events
we saw
related
the
to the
E3,
forecast.
the Europeans, the British, the German, and the French meet in Geneva with the Iranian foreign minister. There were hopes that would get somewhere, and it really didn't.
Cancel that ticket because it looks like Mexico is high
his allies,
on
the Europeans,
on the list of
those speaking to him may have seen this situation come as a surprise. I mean, already we're hearing from Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, saying he's calling for de-escalation and saying that this is a very dangerous escalation, a direct threat to international peace and security. So we are hearing from leaders from the international community waking up to this news, concerned about where this could tip the region. And just to let our viewers know, we are now at the top of the hour. It is 3 a.m. In the UK, 5 a.m. here in Israel, and we are expecting 10 p.m.
Mexico and Syria,
in Washington, where you are, Mark, and we are expecting perhaps in the next minute or so for President Trump to emerge.
Large deviations.
Yes, a very rare address to the nation late at night. These addresses to the nations by US presidents, they come at moments of significance, moments of peril perhaps. They usually come earlier in the day in line with prime time. 6 p.m. is the normal time for such an address. But just a few hours after announcing that he had launched strikes on Iran's nuclear sites, President Donald Trump will shortly address the nation. The biggest moment, I think, for sure, of his presidency, certainly the biggest moment in terms of global affairs for his presidency. He's had so many voices in his ears over the past week.
It is our duty and
this is the
obligation
moment
to
go
make
for it.
sure the
You should
world
strike Iran,
progresses
be decisive,
better.
peace through strength,
Not
and yet
to
many
end
others telling
the
him
world.
he should not do this, that the consequences, the intended consequences and the unintended consequences
it seems like the world's going to come
just
to an
unknown.
end.
Let's listen now to the President
How proud
of the
could we
United
be?
States, who will shortly be taking
We've come such a
that
long
podium.
way just
Sorry,
to end
I
it
jumped the
over
gun
what?
slightly. He's not there yet, but we now have
Over a little bit of
a
hate
live
flick.
shot there of the podium in the White House. And as I say, he
the
will
world
shortly
living
be,
for eternity is more important
by
than
his
any
Secretary of State,
issue that
the
you
Vice
have.
President as well, and
that
the
is
Secretary
priority.
of
the
Defense,
world must go on
to address the nation.
And here
and I guess Yelda to explain why he believes he did this. Here is the president now. Let's listen in.
Thank you very much. A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Short and sweet. Too scared to answer.
You're listening there to that short statement from President Trump, where he's addressed the nation, and he described the operation as a spectacular military success, which is what he's been saying over the course of the last couple of hours. When he first made the announcement on Truth Social that he had launched this attack, he thanked the U.S. military for flying those magnificent machines, he said, and he described Iran as the bully of the Middle East. Let's bring in our Mark Stone Stone, who was listening to that short statement. Mark, that was perhaps the shortest statement I've ever heard Donald Trump make. He was to the point, and he
made it so
talked
short
about
that there's nothing
the
to
spectacular
digest.
military
There's
success
nothing to
that the
dig
United
into.
States has had in the last couple of hours.
There's no reading in between the lines of anything.
That these three attacks on the three sites had been completely, that the three sites have been completely and totally obliterated. Now, he said, the Iranians must make peace. He didn't go into any detail of how this attack unfolded. He didn't explain why his thinking appears to have changed over a relatively short period of time. It was only 24, 36 hours ago that he was of the view
his American troopers are in and
diplomacy
around
should be given
Iran
a chance, and he gave this sort of window, this timeline of
So you
up
would
to
think,
2 weeks. Of that's clearly gone out of the window. But he claims that Iran's nuclear capability has been completely obliterated. We will see whether that is indeed the case. We're only in the very early hours before any assessments can be made on the ground, and they will be very difficult because there will not be. There may be some Israeli Secret Service on the ground there, but it will be very hard to get an accurate assessment of just how successful these strikes have been, but that will come in time. I thought, Yalda, one interesting point that he made, he sought to remind the American people who he was addressing just the malign actions of Iran over so many years. We lost thousands of people, he said. He was reminding Americans why he did this. He was justifying why he has done what many of them did not want him to do, reminding them that so many Americans over the years have been killed by roadside bombs that have been planted, he would argue, by Iranian militia right across the Middle East. This cannot continue, he said. There will be peace or tragedy for Iran. The other point he made is that the mission that was carried out over the last few hours was the most difficult of all the missions that they needed to carry out. Everything from now on, should they have to carry out more missions, he said, should they have to carry out more military action, it will all be easier. I think what he's referencing is the Supreme Leader. He could take him out, as he said before, much, much more easily than this mission was. So we've done the hardest thing now, fall in line, or this will continue, was his message.
Yeah, very much sending a clear warning to Iran that there are two options here, the diplomacy and the path of peace, or if the situation escalates and there are attempts to hit military bases. And we're just speaking to Stuart Ramsey there in Iraq, which is on high alert like the rest of this region, that the Americans have the capability and the will to strike again. I thought it was interesting also that he talked about that military commander Qasem Soleimani, who Donald Trump took out when he served in his first term in 2018, and he talked about the fact that he'd made a decision long ago to prevent Iran from not just acquiring nuclear weapons, but from using its proxies in the region, from targeting Americans, and as you say, reminding Americans that this is not just a fight for Israel and a war that is happening in the Middle East, but this is the reason why he felt America needed to get involved.
Yeah, and I do think that his decision in late 2019 to assassinate Qasem Soleimani, an assassination that took place in early January of 2020, that was a pivotal moment, a kind of inflection point in his political journey, because he took a massive risk then. He went for the most extreme option of those that his generals had given him, and decided back then in late 2019 to order the assassination of a top Iranian general. When that happened, when that drone strike killed Qasem Soleimani on I think January the 3rd, 2020, it sent reverberations around the region. Experts around the world on the Middle East were bracing and saying this is going to create hell across the Middle East. The Iranians will respond. They kind of didn't. There were a few attacks. We went straight to Erbil, and there was an attack on the US base in Erbil. I don't think anyone died, but the Iranians tried to attack back, but they didn't do a great deal. And I think Donald Trump has learned a lesson from that. That if you are decisive and you show strength and you are successful, and then he was, now he hopes he will be again, then the Iranians, they may not retaliate. It's a big gamble. There are so many American targets around the region. The way this goes wrong is if the Iranians manage to hit a US base somewhere in the Middle East, and then on an airstrip like that on the left of the screen, you will not be seeing a president walking to a helicopter. You will be seeing American bodies in coffins. That is the big danger. Donald Trump is calculating that won't happen. He believes that the Iranian proxies around the region have been degraded to such an extent over a couple of years now, and over the last week, the Iranian ability from its homeland to attack across the region has also been degraded. So he is gambling that the Iranians will not, in any satisfactory way, from their perspective, strike back. But as I say, it's a big moment, a big risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, thank you so much for that update. And we'll keep you right there for more analysis. Just in the last few minutes, we heard from President Donald Trump addressing the nation, and the sun has started to come up here where we are. It's just gone 5 o'clock in the morning, and over 2.5 hours ago, we received the news that the United States has launched those series of attacks on the nuclear facilities in Iran. And President Donald Trump confirmed that in the last 10 minutes.
Senator
Let's just bring in our Stuart Ramsey, who's standing by in
Erbil.
And Stuart, we just heard there from the President offering Iran two paths here, that he didn't want them to go down the path of attacking sites, military facilities and bases in places like where you are. But no doubt there's a lot of concern there at the moment.
Eliminate the Iranian.
Yeah, we just saw 3 Chinooks take off from the American air base, which is a few miles away behind me. That doesn't mean anything, of course. We've seen them in the skies, we often do. Definitely, there is a concern here that the Shia militias, who are incredibly powerful, who are angry and have been threatening action against American potential targets here for some time now, if America was to get involved, that they will just simply ignore any orders from Baghdad and will carry out attacks themselves. And of course, it's possible that Iran itself could launch missile strikes here as well. There's a number of potential targets. There's obviously the embassy in Baghdad, which we are told is now effectively emptied. We can't absolutely confirm that, but our sources are good. But there is this concern that this will develop. I think it was interesting, wasn't it, that Mark pointed it out, that the President was talking about the numbers of American servicemen who have been injured. And of course, that took place in Iraq, but it was the technology for the shaped weapons that were used that blew up American military vehicles. It changed the dynamic here, and it took lots of limbs and lots of lives. And of course, that information, how it was done and how they were organised, various militias here came from Iran itself. And that was, I think, what the President was trying to remind the people of the United States. The key thing is, though, has it been as successful as he says it is? As Mark pointed out, totally obliterated is how he's described the nuclear program in these attacks that have taken place. We will have to see how much, what damage has been caused.
Independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont.
I think Mark was suggesting it could be special operations from the Israelis might give us those pictures, I suspect, if they're on the ground. Well, we know they're on the ground, that they will do at some point. And then, of course, there's the satellite imagery, which will come out as well. But it's not just, obviously, in Iraq, but there's other areas of the Gulf as well that have potential targets for Iran. If they try to take the next step and escalate this further. What the president is clearly saying to them is just don't do it. We've done one huge mission, but we can do an awful lot more. And the Israelis, of course, and I think the United States have been quite surprised at how successful Israel has been in its various attacks on Iran over the last week or so, that they will obviously be able to keep operating as well. So,
Bernie Sanders, man.
You have to see what happens next. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but it is actually
Republican
a fact.
Rick
and
Crawford,
it's
an
like
Arizona
here now,
Republican,
and we'll probably start to see things as they develop
that
throughout the day, and there will be more statements. At the moment, what we've heard from Iran is them playing down the effects of this attack. The president says it's totally obliterated. Iranian state television has said that actually it was relatively minor. That may be a choreographed reaction, which obviously the president is wanting, is that Iran just accepts that things aren't going awfully well for them, and maybe it's best that they come to the table and talk. Of course, if it is a successful, as he says, then the issue about their ability to produce nuclear weapons may no longer be an issue. I find that hard to believe, but we don't really know. And in fact, nobody really knew what these weapons were going to be like when they actually were deployed for the first time, I believe, ever in anger, and what exactly they've achieved. That's going to be the key thing, because really, if they have actually completely destroyed it, then it becomes a whole different discussion about the way forward for Iran. And obviously, we've heard from the Israeli Prime Minister already saying that this is about to bring in a new era, as he says, of peace in the Middle East. While what's going on in Gaza continues, of course, that era is not going to change. The number of countries who would potentially, like Saudi Arabia, grow relations with Israel, they're going to find it very difficult to do so while Gaza continues, and there's nothing to indicate that that's ending soon. But if you take the Iran issue, maybe the Americans have been successful in that mission, though history does tell us that peace doesn't usually come about from one side destroying the other necessarily, so that it all comes to a nice conclusion, that it just rumbles on and grows and gets worse later on. But I suppose we'll just wait to see what the Iranian reaction is to what has happened overnight.
Yeah, Stuart, I mean, you point out, something important there. The fact is that for the last week, we focused on this war between Iran and Israel. But, of course, the situation in Gaza continues, where every single day we're seeing dozens of Palestinians being killed simply by trying to get some aid. The simple task of going to an aid depot has become a death sentence for Palestinians. And no doubt that unless that issue is resolved as well, and there is some kind of ceasefire deal, that will hang over this region. But you mentioned earlier the tricky situation that Iraq finds itself in, this balancing act that it finds itself in, because, of course, while there are American bases, and we know that those bases were put there after the 2003 invasion of Iraq, Iraq also shares a close relationship with Iran as well. So the government there is again in a very precarious situation, as it's found itself over the years many, many times, in trying to balance the relationship between the two.
Yeah, well, firstly, let's go back to that whole issue with Gaza and what's happening in the West Bank. While all of this has been going on with Iran, things have not got any better there. And that is a big issue throughout the whole of the Middle East, the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Iraq as well. Because people here are genuinely unhappy about what is happening. So any sort of diplomatic negotiations that take place as a result of what has happened in Iran will continue to be overshadowed by what is happening in Gaza. So there's a lot of pressure here from people who don't like Iran but don't like what is happening in Gaza particularly. And it is worth remembering that an awful lot of the Arab countries see Iran as a big problem, that it is the one that causes great issues within the whole of the region. They don't like Israel particularly, but they don't like Iran much either. So that is a big issue for them. And you're absolutely right. Iraq is in this incredible position, really, whereby it's both naturally close to Iran, but actually has to keep the Americans on board. Now, there was a piece, there was something I was mentioning earlier, which I want to go back to, is about Islamic State. The American soldiers who are here and the various coalition forces that assist them are here to stop Islamic State coming back. If they go into a defensive mode or withdraw, then Islamic State will easily come back in this region, which will destabilize matters again. And that is something that is also of a concern here. Easily forgotten that Islamic State hasn't gone away. And that is why everything that's happening in this last week or so is so incredibly important. And what Iran does next is important too, because of the effects it can have all the way down the line in all sorts of different matters. Power is really important. Obviously, in Iraq, a third of their power comes from Iran. If that was disrupted, then that's an issue. If the Straits of Hormuz are effective, then that's a problem for the world economy. So these things could calm down. That's what President Trump is hoping for. But they could get an awful lot worse. And we really don't know, and that's why it's so important to hear what Iran says. Now, obviously, we know in the past Iran has made all sorts of noises about death and destruction for everyone, and it will escalate matters. Well, it will, or potentially it will, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have the ability to do so on their own. Don't forget, you've got Russia who didn't want this
updated
to happen.
as of today. The United States continues to carry out 24/7 strikes on Houthi locations in Yemen. In the current political climate, we recognize that our commitment to neutral and factual reporting often draws criticism and differing viewpoints from across the political spectrum. We understand that not everyone will agree with our content, but our primary goal remains accuracy. If you have concerns about something we've reported, we encourage you to share.
We'll just have to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Stuart, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there. And as Stuart was saying, President Trump gave that address about 20 minutes ago and described it as a great success. Let's bring in our Mark.
Folks, this is a great time to bring up. If you guys can donate to the channel, it would greatly be appreciated. It would help with
just one image,
buying the YouTube Premium,
which was we're told was taken
more
during the Situation Room briefing a few hours ago while these attacks were ongoing. I think we can put it on the screen. You can see it. It is an image. Oh, we've got more than one. I've only seen one of them. So there is the president in the Situation Room, which is in the West Wing, just yards from the Oval Office. He came back to Washington late this afternoon. That was a planned trip back. He'd spent the day at his golf course in New Jersey, but we knew he was coming back to the White House for a briefing in the Situation Room at 6 p.m. This evening. But at that stage, of course, we did not know that that would be a briefing at which he would have already authorized the strikes and he would watch them unfold. So there, the president on the left, in front of him in the yellow is Susie Wiles, his chief of staff. General Raisin Kane is there, the chair of the Joint Chiefs, the top
Iranian state television. Trump usually bluffs. The extent of the damage needs to be assessed. The Islamic Republic's nuclear industry cannot be destroyed by bombing. Donald Trump reposted an OSINT statement on social media by open source intel that said Fordo is gone. He will be addressing the nation at 10 p.m.
What he says this is an extraordinarily audacious, decisive
attacks were carried out on Saturday.
Which he says has
U.S. military commanders are on alert for potential retaliatory attacks from Tehran. Though no additional attacks on Iran are currently planned, B-2 bombers were used in the attacks on the nuclear facilities by the United States, which had moved heavily B-2 bombers from the U.S. base to a military base located in the Pacific. I guess that's the Garcia location.
Over just how successful this
Diego Garcia location. We're looking further into where the attacks on the bases were actually carried out from. Iran's IRGC, quote, now the war has begun for us.
Yeah, we absolutely did.
And one more here. Fox News has reported that the deployment of the B-2 bombers to Guam was a diversion, and that the actual strikes were conducted by a separate group of bombers positioned earlier.
In the last 24 hours
While we were unable to independently verify this claim at this time, we are actively investigating. The tactic appears consistent with the previous instances of military deception, such as when Israel signaled a ground incursion into Gaza, prompting Hamas to retreat into tunnels that were subsequently targeted. That sounds like a bunch of mumbo jumbo there.
Our very successful attack on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran. He said a full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site, Fordow. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. And over the course of the subsequent hours, we got more detail on what had been hit. The 3 main nuclear sites had been hit. A total of 6 massive bunker-busting bombs were dropped on these sites, on the main site at Fordow, and Tomahawk missiles on the other 2 sites that you can see there. We then had detail of from the speech, from the address to the nation itself, an address where he claimed that these 3 sites had been completely and totally obliterated. Now they must make peace, he said. He sought as well to reassure the American people and to justify his decision tonight to the American people who remember a significant number of the people who voted for him were very against him taking any action in this faraway war, as they would see it. He has decided to defy them, and part of his statement tonight in the White House was an attempt to justify that, to remind them just how involved in malign activities Iran has been over so many decades and has resulted in the death of so many American service people across the Middle East. So a justification there, and then a message as well to the Iranians. He pointed out that the operation that took place this evening in Iran was the most complicated, the most difficult operation that they could have carried out. Anything that comes after this, he said, will be much, much easier. That was a warning to the supreme leader, a warning to the Iranian government. Now, he says, after the strength comes the peace, in his view, and he is demanding that the Iranian leadership now fall into line, his hope is that a line is drawn under this and that nothing more happens. But as we've been discussing, a massive gamble for the president. Will Iran retaliate? And if it does, how successful will that retaliation be?
You ever see hippies getting into fights?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. As you say, a gamble for the president,
always
because
the people that don't
he
smoke
feels that stern warning that he has given to Iran will be enough to send a message to the Iranians that they shouldn't try and retaliate in any way, and the only way forward now is diplomacy. But of course, if we think about the last 65 or 70 days or so, the administration has been speaking with Iranian officials trying to come up with some kind of nuclear deal. And the mood music at one point was that it was heading in the right direction, that it was very positive. Donald Trump said that they were very close to signing a nuclear deal. And then, of course, we later heard that there was a 60-day sort of deadline, and that the Israelis said that if the Iranians hadn't come to some kind of agreement with the Americans by the 60th day, that they would launch this attack. And then, of course, on the 61st day, that's exactly what we saw happen. So we'll have to wait and see how the Iranians, frankly, respond to Donald Trump's warnings, but also this olive branch that he's put out again, saying, let's go down the diplomacy path.
Yeah, I think in simple terms, there were two objectives of this mission tonight. That the first practical objective was to once and for all remove Iran's nuclear capability, its ability to enrich uranium and to produce a bomb. And remember, we've heard various views from different people, even within the American administration, of how close they were to a nuclear weapon. Donald Trump said a couple of weeks. His spokesperson said a couple of weeks. We've heard other officials within the U.S. administration saying actually they were it would take a lot longer for them to get a nuclear weapon. But I think on one thing everyone is agreed. Iran had, for a country that did not at the moment have nuclear weapons, it had enriched uranium far greater than it ever needed to for civilian purposes. And so what Donald Trump wanted to do, objective number one, was to remove the ability for Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. He claims he's done that tonight, although it is also the case, I've been speaking to experts over the past few days, American Department of Defense officials, whose view is that you could never completely destroy Iran's nuclear ability without having boots on the ground. So we'll see whether or not he's achieved that objective. His other objective was to create a sense of deterrence, to show, in simple terms, to show everyone who's boss. And he's not only it's not only the Iranians. He knows that the Russians are watching, the Chinese are watching. This was a moment for him to seize, a moment for him to seize, and a moment for him to create a sense of deterrence globally and show, in his view, that America is all-powerful and that no country can or should defy the United States.
Put his name on it. I was the first to use this type of bomb.
Mark, thank you so much for all of your analysis there. Well, as we've been saying in the last half an hour or so, we heard from President Donald Trump, but we've also been hearing from Benjamin Netanyahu. The two men had spoken a little earlier, but Benjamin Netanyahu put out a video on X talking about the success of this operation. Let's just have a listen.
No regard for their lives, right? No regard for human.
Congratulations, President Trump.
Civilian lives.
Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history.
To USA.
In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things.
If you're going to go into a war,
but in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed.
They might have to go into
it has done what no other country on earth could do. History will record.
That's why he's trying
President
to downplay
Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime, the world's most dangerous weapons.
That's not the way
his leadership today
right? You're going to be
has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond
got involved, and that's
to a future of prosperity and peace.
I don't know how you just dip after that, right? Like
President Trump and I often say
that's never happened in the history of wars. You can't just
first
bomb
comes strength,
a country and say, nope, we're not involved. We're not involved.
And tonight, President Trump and the United States
you are fully involved,
a lot of strength.
And if this thing goes on for 10
President
years,
Trump,
you will
you
will have to fund
the people of Israel. Thank you. The forces of civilization. Thank you.
In any way, shape,
God bless
or form.
America. God bless Israel.
Or fund
and may
this
God
other
bless
country,
our unshakable
now,
alliance.
Right? If they're involved for 10 years straight, guess what's happening? You're funding Israel now.
Well, that was Benjamin Netanyahu speaking a little earlier there in a video that he posted, a pre-recorded video that he posted on X, thanking President Trump. And we heard from President Trump about half an hour ago or so. So let's bring in our Alistair Bunkle, who can give us some analysis on this developing situation and story. Although if you were to ask the US president, he'd probably say this isn't developing. We have done what we needed to do. And we've made a decision, and now we are telling the Iranians, don't come after any of our military assets, don't target our allies, and we can sort of draw a line in the sand here.
And with the caveat that if you do decide to hit us back and hit us back hard, then we have other targets in our sights. We've done the difficult job tonight. Everything else we decide to do, if we need to, will be easier than what we've done tonight. So there is a warning from Donald Trump. The Americans, of course, will be expecting and will have priced in a form of Iranian retaliation. It is what form that comes in that will be key to how this moves forward. I think that the Iranians will feel compelled to respond. There will be different voices in the Supreme Leader's ear, some urging a major response. I think the Revolutionary Guard will want to hit back hard, others urging some caution. We'll see whether the Iranians take their time or whether they retaliate quickly. Retaliation in and of itself is not necessarily the strongest move for Iran.
I do believe I'm smoking
think
Canada's
the
finest
analysis
right
in the hours ahead will be that
not the
however
personal
successful
or else
the
that
US
we all
strikes
know would be
on
the
the Iranian
person,
nuclear facilities have
Canada's
been,
finest.
it's
If it comes out of
unlikely
Steve's
that they
garden,
have entirely eliminated
Canada's
Iran's
finest.
nuclear program. Iran has been developing a nuclear program for many years, and I don't think they will stop now. And it might be their ultimate calculation that they still have something left to develop, and rather than engaging a massive war, drawing in the Americans and perhaps threatening the survival of the Iranian regime, actually the strongest thing they can do is to some extent take this hit but retain some of their power in order to rebuild in the years ahead.
And Ali, Israel will be waking up to this news. The Iranians will be waking up to this news, and no doubt this region will be on edge. Already the Israeli military has said all schools will be shut and all non-essential work and movement needs to be kept at a minimum at this point in time.
Israelis will be waking up now to this news because they haven't been woken up overnight, either by preemptive alarms from the Home Command in anticipation of an Iranian attack, or because of sirens going off because there is an incoming ballistic missile attack. Pretty unusual. This will, well, I think we can now say, now it's first light, has been the first night in 8 days that has been an unbroken night. Now, again, we shouldn't read too much into that. Iran, even by the IDF's estimation, still retain quite a considerable ballistic missile threat, and we would expect them to use it at some point over the coming hours. It's Sunday here, the first day of the working week, but again, it's going to be a very muted day as people stay at home, businesses remain shut, schools remain closed, and everybody waits to see what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely. A nation, a region on edge. Ali, thank you so much. Well, we are following all the developments here on the ground, but as we've been reporting in the last few hours, the United States, under President Trump's command, has launched those series of attacks on the nuclear facilities in Iran, Fordow, Natanz, and in Isfahan. And we, of course, are following things as they develop. We heard from the US President in the last half an hour or so. We've also heard from Benjamin Netanyahu. We will be back at 6 a.m. UK time for our breakfast coverage. But Sam, back to you in the studio for now.
Yalda, thank you very much indeed. So our coverage does continue here on Sky News following the news that the US has now directly targeted 3 nuclear sites in Iran, the sites of Fordow, Natanz and Isfahan. I can bring in my guest now, Laura Holgate, former US ambassador to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Hello to you, Laura. Thank you for joining us here on Sky News. First of all, your assessment on the developments of the past few hours and what you've heard about this action by the United States.
Well, I think it's clear that there's been some very significant damage done to the site, but we're going to need to wait to see exactly what the impact of that damage is going to be. The material that was at the site is not very radioactive, and it was almost certainly fully contained in any kind of collapse that would have come from the massive ordnance that has been dropped there. And so there's really no radiological concern, and I can't imagine that any humans would have survived in there. So the toxicity of the enriched uranium gas that we've all been talking about is also probably contained by this kind of an attack. But we'll have to wait and see what the actual damage assessment is. The other two sites that were attacked had already been attacked 1 or 2 times by the Israelis. So very little left there, frankly, on the nuclear side to additionally attack. But once again, we'll have to wait and see what the damage assessment is.
Well, the Israelis had particularly asked the US for help in targeting the Fordo facility in particular, that deep underground bunker-busting bomb that they needed. How important was that facility to Iran's enrichment program?
Well, it was important in that it was so hard to attack, and it might have been the component that might have been preserved if the U.S. had not joined or if there hadn't been further
My work is easy because I use ClickUp. Here's how I keep track of all my tasks. I start by brain dumping everything I need to get done in a list view. Next, I set a priority and a due date to keep things on track. I create custom statuses to organize my progress exactly how I want. I like to add the action items field so AI can show me the next steps. I add my teammates as watchers so they're in the loop. ClickUp makes work easy, from personal projects to running a multi-billion-dollar company. Click the link below to create your workspace for free.
Material from Natanz, material and centrifuges from Natanz to Fordo, but the material and capability that was there was really quite small compared to what was already damaged.
Well, Donald Trump himself has described it as a spectacular military success. In your view, was this the right move by the Trump administration?
Well, I think the question is really, what does this do about Iran's, to affect Iran's judgment of whether they need a nuclear weapon? Every evidence supports that they had not yet made a decision to proceed to a nuclear weapon. Even though they had material that could very quickly have been enriched to weapons level, it was still going to take some time to actually create a weapon itself, to turn that material into a form that could be used in a weapon, from a gas to a metal, and so on. But the regime had not yet decided to go for a nuclear weapon, as far as the latest intelligence suggested. So the question is, what do the Iranians learn from this? Do they learn that they, in fact, do need a nuclear capacity to deter Israel in the future? Or do they learn that this is the end of their ambiguous nuclear program, intentionally ambiguous nuclear program, and that the world is not prepared to accept their kind of brinksmanship on will they or won't they with a nominally civilian program?
Well, Iran's Atomic Energy Organization has said that this is a breach of international law. What's your view on that?
Well, there's a lot of different laws and a lot of different ways in which those laws apply to certain countries. The primary international law regarding attacks on nuclear facilities is the second protocol to the Geneva protocols, to the Geneva Convention that sets out the laws of war. The U.S. is not a party to that second protocol, which is where the prohibition on nuclear sites, attacks on nuclear sites, is found. Other countries are also not members of that. Russia is not a member of that, has not ratified, does not abide by that protocol. So it very much depends on what is the law that applies to the countries at issue.
Well, Iran's foreign minister had a few days ago said that if there had been any U.S. direct involvement, it would be a very, very dangerous situation going forward. The Iranians had remained defiant, saying that they would retaliate. Where do you think this leaves Iran now and their capability to potentially hit back?